first launched Dark Dialogue Distilled, the plan was simple. Take our biggest episodes and turn them into clean, short versions, bite-sized true crime stripped down to the essential facts. And on paper, that made sense. With all the long-form investigations we do on the network, having a quick version felt like a natural companion. But the more I worked on it, the more something started to bother me. These cases aren't meant to be cut apart and trimmed into summaries. Not the ones that we've done, and not the ones we haven't touched yet. Victims don't become simpler because we choose a shorter episode length. Families don't hurt any less. The unanswered questions don't shrink. The mistakes, the contradictions, the holes in the timeline, they don't disappear just because I hit delete on a paragraph. So I asked myself, why am I shrinking these cases when what they really need is room to breathe? And that's what it hit me. This show shouldn't be the edited down version of something that we already did. It should be the chance to re-examine old cases, examine new cases, all with a sharper lens, a looser format, and the freedom to be honest about what we got right and what we didn't. Because here's the truth most podcasters don't like to admit. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes new information comes forward. Sometimes listeners catch something that we missed. Sometimes months or years later, we see the case differently than we did the first time around. And those moments shouldn't be ignored. They should be addressed. This show gives me the space to do that. To revisit cases, correct the record, acknowledge criticisms, dig deeper into the parts that don't get enough time, and talk openly about what's changed in my understanding of the case. This isn't the main show. It's not Rocky Mountain Reckoning. It doesn't follow a strict outline, a segment structure, or a narrative formula. This is a looser format on purpose. It allows me to talk about whatever part of the case deserves the focus. A single contradiction in the timeline, a witness statement that never sat right with me, a theory that needs dismantling, a rumor that harmed the investigation, a detail I learned after the episode aired, or a mistake I made that needs correction. This is me, one person, one mic, looking at a case exactly the way I do when the show script is closed. The production pressure is gone, and it's just the evidence, the questions, and an uncomfortable truth. Not a polished story, not a condensed recap, a distilled investigation. So if you're here for the raw analysis, the things that didn't make it into the big show, the second thoughts, the unanswered questions, and the parts of the case that still gnaw at me, welcome to the new Distilled. This is the lone researcher format. And today, we're starting with a case that has bothered me for years. One of the most baffling, frustrating, and emotionally heavy unsolved disappearances in Kentucky. The Vanishing of Brookelyn Farthing. At 4:26 in the morning, an 18-year-old from Berea, Kentucky sent a text no one ever wants to see. Please hurry, I'm scared. Not annoyed, not uncomfortable, scared. Her name was Brookelyn Farthing. Just hours earlier, she'd been doing what a lot of small-town kids do on a summer Friday. She spent the day with her family, celebrating her grandfather's birthday. That night, she went to a field party out on Red Lick Road with her sister and a cousin. Bonfire, music, friends, that kind of thing. By the early morning hours, the party was thinning out. Her sister and cousin left. The friend she was supposed to stay with bailed on her after an argument. And Brookelyn, 18 years old, newly graduated, standing in the middle of a rural Kentucky night, found herself stranded. A 23-year-old acquaintance, Josh Hensley, offered her a ride. Instead of going home, she ended up at his place, a foreclosed house on Dillon Court with no electricity, no running water, and according to him, just enough furniture left for a couch. From that house in the early hours of June 22nd, Brookelyn started reaching out. She called and texted family. She messaged her ex-fiancé, Jared, asking him to pick her up when he got off of work. And at 4:26 a.m., she sent the message that defines this case. Please hurry, I'm scared. This is not a casual check-in. This is not a, hey, where are you? This is a young woman telling someone she trusts that something is wrong. And then about an hour later, everything changes. A final text goes out from her phone to Jared saying, Never mind. I'm okay. I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County. Her family doesn't believe she wrote it. Investigators don't think it sounds like her. And when you look at the timing and everything that happens next, it's hard to argue with them. Because shortly after that message, the living room of the foreclosed house catches fire. There's no power in the home, no obvious accidental source, yet the couch catches hot enough to damage the floor before firefighters knock it down. Inside and around that house, searchers and investigators find some of Brookelyn's personal belongings. Her purse, her overnight bag, her footwear, the kinds of things she was known to keep close. The two things nobody finds? Brookelyn and her phone. For nearly 12 years, this case has been a tangle of unanswered questions. Terrified text followed by a sudden, never mind. A fire in a house with no electricity, personal items left behind, a phone that later pings miles away, and the disappearance window so tight it almost collapses under its own weight. Tonight, we're going to walk through the 10 parts of this case that bother me the most, the details that don't line up, the decisions that don't make sense, and the questions that still hang over the disappearance of Brookelyn Farthing. Before we get into the 10 things about this case that don't add up, let's pull back and look at the timeline as we actually know it, the part that isn't speculation, rumor, or hindsight. Here's what we can say with confidence. On June 21st, 2013, Brookelyn Farthing spent the day celebrating her grandfather's birthday. Family photos, time with her cousins, normal summer evening, nothing out of character, nothing unusual. Later that night, she and two relatives, her sister Paige and their cousin, headed to a field party on Red Lick Road, a typical rural Kentucky gathering. Bonfire, friends, and a mix of people coming and going. At some point after midnight, a small argument broke out between Brookelyn and the girl that she was supposed to stay with. That friend left, her sister left, her cousin left, and Brookelyn stayed behind, expecting to leave later or catch a ride home. A 23-year-old acquaintance, Josh Hensley, offered her a lift. Instead of driving her home, he took her to a foreclosed house on Dillon Court, a house with no electricity, no running water, and minimal furnishings. From inside that house, Brookelyn contacted multiple people throughout the early morning hours. Calls, texts, and one message that stands out above all the rest. Please hurry, I'm scared. Around 4:30 a.m., Jared, her ex-fiancé, agreed to come get her when he got off work, but by the time he arrived in the area, he couldn't reach her. Sometime after 5 a.m., her phone sends a message saying, quote, going to a party in Rockcastle County, and that she's okay. A claim her family and investigators have repeatedly said does not sound like Brookelyn at all. Shortly after dawn, the living room couch in the Dillon Courthouse catches on fire. The house has no power, no breaker box, and no clear ignition source. Firefighters respond quickly and prevent major structural loss. Inside or just outside the house, investigators find several of Brookelyn's personal belongings. Her cowboy boots, her purse, her overnight bag. These were items she was rarely without. The items missing? Like I said before, Brookelyn herself and her cell phone. Her phone later pings a ways away on Blue Lick Road, a rural area with heavy tree cover, uneven terrain, and plenty of places someone could discard evidence. Despite searches, interviews, and years of public involvement, no trace of Brookelyn has ever been found. Her case remains open, active, and deeply painful for her family. Now, if you want a complete, detailed, step-by-step reconstruction of the entire night, the full episode of Dark Dialogue walks through every timeline minute, every witness account, and every known detail. It's there whenever you want to dive deeper. But right now, for this show, I want to take a different approach, because when you strip the case down to the essentials, when you remove assumptions, rumors, and noise, 10 parts of this story stand out so sharply they almost demand a second look. 10 things that bother me, 10 things that don't make sense, 10 things that raise far more questions than they answer. Let's start with the one that haunts most people first, those last text messages. The last messages that came from Brookelyn Farthing's phone are the backbone of this entire case. They're the only direct window we have into her state of mind during the final 90 minutes that she was ever heard from. And they paint a picture that is disturbing, inconsistent, and extremely difficult to line up with any innocent explanation. Here's what we know for sure. Sometime after 4 a.m, Brookelyn was inside the foreclosed house on Dillon Court. She lost her original ride. The friend she planned to stay with had left after an argument, and the only person around was a 23-year-old man that she didn't know well. At 4 a.m, she reached out to her sister Paige, asking for a ride. Paige couldn't come. It wasn't safe for her to drive, and their cousin, who was also there, was too intoxicated to help. So Brookelyn did what a lot of 18-year-olds would do. She tried someone else. She texted her ex-boyfriend Jared and asked if he could pick her up once he got off work that morning. And then at 4:26 a.m., the tone of everything changes. A series of messages come through, short and direct. I'm scared. Please hurry. Not passive, not subtle, and not vague. She didn't say, I'm uncomfortable or can you come soon? She used the word scared, and she repeated the urgency. These are fear-driven texts. They read like someone trying to keep her voice down or someone trying not to be caught on her phone. They also match the timeline of a young woman who was suddenly aware she could not leave on her own and who needed someone that she trusted to get there quickly. Now, here's where the entire case takes a sharp left turn, because about an hour later, somewhere between 5:30 and 5:45, another message is sent from Brookelyn's phone to Jared. This one says, never mind, I'm okay. I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County. And if you're thinking, wait, what 18-year-old goes to a party at 5:30 in the morning with no ride and with her boots, purse, and overnight bag still sitting at the house after telling someone that she's scared? You are not alone. Brookelyn's family doesn't believe she wrote the message. Investigators have said the same thing publicly and privately for years. And when you line it up next to her previous messages, the shift is so unnatural, it practically highlights itself. There are a few reasons for that. First, the hour. There are no parties at 6 a.m. in rural Kentucky. Not the kind you suddenly decide to head to with no transportation, no shoes, and your purse sitting inside the house you just left. Second, the language is out of character. Her earlier messages were tight, urgent, clipped. This one reads calm, casual, and almost rehearsed. Third, the motive. If someone wanted to buy time, if someone wanted to push away the one person who was on the way to get her, this is exactly the kind of message that you would send. And fourth, we know Brookelyn's phone went missing with her. It was never found. It later pinged miles away, long after she stopped responding. Taken together, these two messages, the 4:26 a.m. fear and the 5:30 a.m. reassurance, form a contradiction so sharp it's almost impossible to explain away. One message says, I'm in trouble, and the next says, forget it, everything is fine. In cases like this, the investigators should look at three things. 1, content, what was said. 2, timing, when it was said. And 3, behavioral alignment, whether the message fits the victim's situation and personality. The first set fits the situation. The second set does not. And that is why these messages, more than anything else, are the heartbeat of this case, because if Brookelyn didn't send that final text, then someone else had her phone. And if someone else had her phone, then whatever happened to her was already in motion. And that's just the beginning. Question number 2 that I have, the confusing change of plans message. When people talk about the turning point in the Brookelyn Farthing case, this is it. The sudden 5:30 a.m. text that flips the narrative on its head. Everything about this message clashes with what we know about the hour before it. Her fear, her urgency, her attempts to get a ride, and her clear intention to leave the house. And that's why this single text has become one of the most scrutinized pieces of evidence in the entire disappearance. So let's break that down with verified information only. Timing. The message does not fit the timeline. After a long stretch of text messages where Brookelyn was actively trying to get picked up and expressing fear, A text suddenly goes out from her phone at approximately 5:30. This message appears after her failed attempts at finding a safe ride, her escalating fear, and her final communication of panic. It comes at a time when the homeowner claims he had stepped out to do chores, and there are no other verified human beings documented as being with her. This exact overlap, his absence and the text appearing, is one of the reasons this message raises so many questions. To the content, a total tone shift. The text says, quote, "Never mind, I'm okay. I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County," end quote. Nothing about this message lines up with anything that she had said or done that night. The content itself takes the case in a different direction, except that nothing supports it. 3, out of character behavior. Her family, friends, and investigators have all emphasized there was no known party in Rockcastle County. No one was hosting one. No one was attending one, especially not at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and especially not in rural Kentucky. She had no ride. Her sister couldn't come. Her cousin was intoxicated. Her ex Jared was stuck at work until around 7 a.m. There are no calls, no texts, no arrangements, no witnesses, no posts, no camera footage, nothing showing that she left or planned to leave for another location. She was trying to leave the house, but not to go to another party. This part is confirmed repeatedly by family and friends. She wasn't out looking for another good time. She wanted out of the situation that she was already in. 4, did she actually send it? This is the central question, and no evidence has ever been released confirming whether the message came from Brookelyn's own hands. What we do know is that her boyfriend did not buy the change in tone. He went from "she's scared" to "she's suddenly okay." Even he has publicly stated that he does not believe the 5:30 a.m. text was truly from her. Family doesn't believe it either. The message contradicts her earlier state of fear, her attempts to get home, her usual behavior, and her patterns of communication. Investigators consider it suspicious. Law enforcement has repeatedly highlighted that the message is inconsistent, unconfirmed, and abnormal. And the homeowner's timeline creates opportunity. The man who last saw her has given inconsistent statements about what time he left, what time he returned, and why he left her alone. This inconsistency creates a window where someone else had both opportunity and motive to send a message meant to mislead. It's important to note that no source has confirmed that he sent it, only that the circumstances suggest the possibility of access and motive. Number 5, no follow-up, no confirmation, no evidence. After that text message, nothing. No replies, no confirmations, no calls, no sightings, no posts, no camera hits, no vehicle reports. Her phone goes silent and is never recovered. Combined with the fact that all of her belongings except the clothes that she wore and her phone were left behind, the message does not appear to reflect real plans. Number 6, the investigative significance of this text. Why it matters so much. The 5:30 a.m. text functions as 1, a potential alibi attempt. If someone wanted to make it look like she left the house willingly, this is exactly the kind of message that they would send. Number 2, a delay tactic. If someone wanted her ex-boyfriend not to show up at 7 a.m. and "I'm okay, I'm going somewhere else" message would buy that time. And 3, a diversion. It shifts attention away from the house, the last place that she was verifiably seen alive. This is why the text is often described as the moment the case, quote, "goes dark." Number 7, public and family interpretation. Across all credible sources, the overwhelming consensus is that she did not send this text. People familiar with her say it's not her tone, it's not the way she talked, it's not what she would have said, and at that time, it's not something that she would have ever done. And investigators openly acknowledge that the text is suspicious. There is zero evidence she ever left that house or made it anywhere in Rockcastle County. So, just a summary of why this text is one of the most concerning elements of this case is one, it directly contradicts everything that she expressed earlier. 2, it describes a plan that had no basis in reality. 3, no ride, no witnesses, no destination, no reason. 4, it appears after she communicated fear. 5, it aligns with a window where someone else could have accessed her phone. 6, it functionally delays anyone coming to help her. 7, it does not match her behavior or her communication patterns. And finally, it marks the last verifiable activity from her phone. This is why the 5:30 a.m. message remains one of the largest, most suspicious red flags in the entire disappearance. Question number 3, the fire on Dillon Court, the most suspicious hour in the case. If the last text message is the moment that tells us Brookelyn was afraid, the fire on Dillon Court is the moment that tells us something was being covered up. It remains one of the most contested, controversial, and poorly explained events in her disappearance. And every version of what happened during that hour comes from one person, Joshua Hensley, the last known individual with her that morning, according to his own statements. Let's break down what is actually known, what is disputed, and why this fire changes everything. Number 1, the setting. A vacant house with no utilities. Hensley has been staying intermittently at a foreclosed home in Dillon Court, verified across all major reporting. There's no electricity, there's no running water, there's no active power sources. This immediately eliminates most categories of accidental fires. There were no heaters plugged in, no lamps, no appliances, no wiring failures. In a powerless house, a cigarette becomes the only ignition source Hensley has ever offered. And in my personal opinion, that explanation does not withstand scrutiny. Hensley told investigators that he left the house around 6 a.m. to feed horses at a nearby farm. He said that when he walked out the door, Brookelyn was sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette. He claims that he returned around 7 a.m. and found the couch on fire, smoke in the living room, Brookelyn gone, her phone missing, and all of her belongings still there. But here's a critical fact. No independent evidence confirms that she ever left the house alive. Nothing corroborates his story. No witnesses, no video, no vehicle sightings, no footprints, no confirmed phone movement, no calls or texts after that time. All we know for sure is that at 7 a.m., Hensley reported a fire. Anything else relies entirely on his word, and in my opinion, is that his version is just simply not credible. Then we got to talk about the fire itself, how it burned, where it burned, and why it makes no sense. All documented sources agree on the physical facts. 1, the fire originated on or inside the couch. 2, it burned downward into the floorboards beneath it. And 3, it charred a focused area rather than escalating into a full house fire. And why this matters? Most accidental fires, especially cigarette fires, burn upward and behave very differently. Firefighters and investigators publicly described the fire as suspicious, not accidental, and inconsistent with a careless cigarette because nothing in that powerless house provided a natural ignition source. And number 4, why the cigarette started it story fails Fire Science 101. Hensley said Brookelyn must have fallen asleep smoking, but this explanation collapses under factual documented fire science. Cigarette fires are extremely rare. National data shows that cigarettes account for only around 2% of residential fires in the United States. Furniture materials and fire-safe cigarette laws have made this scenario even less common. A cigarette can absolutely cause a fire, but normally only when the person is asleep or impaired by substances or is unaware of the smoldering, or is somehow trapped in an enclosed, highly flammable setup. Brooklyn's documented behavior, texting urgently and repeatedly, trying to leave, does not match that scenario. Then we got to talk about the smolder timeline, why the fire could not have happened the way Hensley described. A cigarette does not immediately ignite a couch. Fire science testing shows that it first goes into what's known as the smoldering phase. And smoldering typically lasts 20 minutes to several hours. The normal range is anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes. Some burn tests show up to 89 minutes before flame. Smoke is usually always visible during the smoldering phase. And then it goes into the flaming phase. Once the material heats up enough, open flame can appear within minutes, but only after that long smoldering period. To accept Hensley's story, all of this must be true. 1, Brookelyn started smoking, which is not a known habit of hers. 2, she fell asleep instantly in the house where she already felt unsafe. 3, the cigarette fell perfectly into a smolder-friendly cavity. 4, it smoldered for a long period with no visible smoke noticed. And 5, it transitioned to a flame strong enough to burn through the couch and into the floor, all within approximately a 60-minute window that Hensley claims he was gone. This sequence is not consistent with standard smolder behavior, burn patterns, oxygen presence, furniture composition, or the time available. Fire-safe cigarettes make it even less likely. By 2010, all U.S. cigarettes were legally required to be fire-safe. They are designed to self-extinguish when left unattended. All of this combined makes the cigarette theory scientifically improbable. And again, it's my opinion. Based on fire science and timeline analysis, Hensley's explanation does not match reality. Number 6, the destroyed evidence, the couch left outside. One of the biggest failures in this case is that the burned couch was removed from the house and left outdoors for weeks. Rain, humidity, insects, and handling contaminated or erased possible accelerant residues, blood evidence, hair and fibers, transferred DNA, impact traces, burn patterns, tool marks, etc., etc., etc. We have no public evidence that a full accelerant analysis was ever completed before the couch was exposed to the elements. This decision may have permanently erased the most important physical evidence in the case. Number 7, why this fire is the central red flag. This fire is not a side detail. It is the moment the story changes. What we know for certain is that the fire began where Brookelyn was last claimed to be alive. It happened during the same hour that Hensley's story places her disappearance. The house had no natural ignition sources. The burn pattern is incompatible with a typical cigarette fire. Her belongings were still inside. The only account placing her at the house is Hensley's, and it is unverified and absolutely unsupported. And in my personal opinion, this fire looks like an attempt to destroy evidence. Whoever set that couch on fire wanted whatever happened on it or near it to disappear forever. Question number 4, the personal belongings left behind and what they really tell us. If the fire is the moment this case turns suspicious, the abandoned belongings are the moment it becomes absolutely impossible to believe Brookelyn left of her own free will. Everything left behind inside that house tells a story, one that directly contradicts the idea of a voluntary departure. Let's break down what we actually know. Number 1, what was left behind? Every credible source agrees almost everything Brookelyn would never leave without was found inside the Dillon courthouse, including her cowboy boots. These were the boots she was wearing that night. Multiple sources placed them either inside the home or left right outside on the porch. And Brookelyn was not the kind of person to walk anywhere barefoot at 5:30 in the morning. Her purse and wallet. Her purse, wallet, ID, and bank cards were all found at the scene. No voluntary trip to another party, another house, or anywhere else makes sense without them being taken with her. Her overnight bag or duffel. She brought a bag containing clothes and toiletries for the night. That bag was left untouched. Other items, various small personal items were also present, like toothbrush, makeup, hygiene items, phone charger, keys. This is important because it shows both that she brought items with intent to stay somewhere safe, and she did not take anything that would support leaving on foot or by car. This is one of the strongest indications of foul play in the entire case. What was missing? Only two things disappeared that night: Brookelyn herself and her cell phone. That's it. Not her purse, not her clothes, not her boots, not her money, not her ID, and not her overnight bag. Only her and her phone. The one thing she would need to continue asking for help. This is a hallmark indicator of an involuntary disappearance. Number 3 is why this makes a voluntary departure impossible. Brookelyn's family and friends have been consistent for over a decade. She never left her belongings behind. She always kept track of her purse and phone. She never walked anywhere unfamiliar without her shoes on. She was trying desperately to find a ride home, not a ride to another party. And national missing persons experts say the same thing. Quote, when a person leaves behind identification, wallet, money, and transportation items, the likelihood of a voluntary departure drops dramatically. End quote. In other words, a runaway doesn't leave their wallet. Someone heading to a 6 a.m. party doesn't leave their boots. Someone leaving voluntarily takes their purse and their money, and someone walking away in fear clings to their phone. None of these things happened. Number 4, the no transportation problem. Brookelyn did not have a car keys, a ride arranged, a known friend headed to Rockcastle County, or any proof that she was planning to go anywhere at all. There is no witness, video, or physical evidence placing her walking away, riding away, getting picked up, being seen by neighbors, traveling in any direction. Her car was at another location entirely. She had no transportation and no plan for transportation. So number 5 is the investigative meaning of all this. From law enforcement's perspective, the belongings were one of the earliest and strongest red flags that something was wrong. Police have pointed to this repeatedly. Not leaving with essential items is inconsistent with voluntary behavior. Leaving only with a phone is consistent with being removed from the house by coercion or force. Her items were not disturbed, suggesting an abrupt separation. When you combine that with her frantic "I'm scared" text, the suspicious fire, the lack of witnesses, the lack of a ride, the fact that only the phone is missing, it becomes extremely difficult to accept any narrative suggesting that she walked away on her own. Number 6 is possible staging, based on the evidence, not on assumption. Some analysis and community members have suggested the belongings may have been deliberately left in place to create the illusion that she simply walked off. To be clear, there is no direct evidence proving staging, but the arrangement and the choice of what was missing versus what was left behind raise obvious questions. Why would someone frightened enough to text "I'm scared" leave her boots in a stranger's house? Why would her overnight bag be left neatly with nothing missing? Why leave money, ID? Why take only the phone, the one item needed to call for help? Nothing about these choices aligns with voluntary behavior. And in my personal opinion, the belongings left behind look staged to support the narrative that Brookelyn just left. So the bigger picture, when viewed alongside the fire and the text, the belongings become one of the clearest indicators that Brookelyn did not walk away. She did not plan to go anywhere else. Someone else controlled the circumstances of her disappearance. Everything she needed to function in the world was left behind. Everything that could connect her to the outside world, namely her phone, was taken with her. So now the 5th question that just bugs the shit out of me about this case: contradictory witness accounts. What Josh says, what others say, and what the facts simply cannot support. If there is one part of this story where the truth should be straightforward, it's the final hour before Brookelyn vanished. Instead, this is where things become the most tangled, because the timeline everyone relies on, the timeline the investigation had to start with, comes entirely from one man. Josh Hensley, and his account has never been independently confirmed in any way. So let's break down what he said, what others said, and what doesn't line up. First off, Hensley's version of events, the only version that we have about that hour. Across interviews and police reports, Hensley's core statements are: he left Brookelyn alone around 6 a.m. He claims she was sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette waiting for a ride. She was fine when he walked out the door. He says she seemed anxious but told him she'd be okay until someone come to get her. He returned around 7 a.m. and when he walked back inside, the couch was on fire, Brookelyn was gone, her phone was gone, everything else she owned was still there. That is his complete timeline. But here's the problem. Nothing in his version of events has ever been independently verified in any way. Not the times, not the sequence, not the claim that she was alone, not the idea that she left the house, not even the claim that he returned exactly when he says he did. Everything depends on his word. And in my opinion, his word has never aligned well with the physical reality of that morning. Next, we have the discrepancies in the timeline. The clock doesn't match the events at all. Multiple sources, including community interviews and early statements, highlight the inconsistencies. The exact time that he left is unclear. Some accounts suggest he left closer to 5:45. Others say it might have been as late as 6:30. The return time is also unclear. About an hour later is vague and has been described anywhere from 45 minutes to 60 minutes to damn near 2 hours. This matters because, like we said, a cigarette-caused fire needs at least 30 minutes, more likely over an hour, just to smolder. Another period to reach open flame, and an additional time to burn through a couch and into the floor. That timeline is extremely tight, too tight for what he describes, and nothing about the burn pattern matches a casual 1 hour absence. Number 3, the she was alone claim, absolutely unconfirmed. Hensley reportedly insisted she was alone in the house when I left, but this cannot be proven. No witness has ever confirmed she was alone. No neighbor saw him leave her alone. No passerby corroborated it. So the claim that no one else entered or exited during the early morning window rests entirely on what Hensley says. No witnesses, no surveillance, no corroboration. Number 4 is the family's response, the immediate skepticism. Brookelyn's family has never accepted Hensley's version of events. They've said publicly that his story never made any sense. His details have changed. His behavior afterward was evasive or inconsistent. They felt information was held back or filtered. They were not given a full, clear accounting of exactly what happened inside that house. None of this proves guilt, but it absolutely undermines his reliability as the sole narrator of that morning. And again, in my personal opinion, their skepticism is justified. Next, we have the law enforcement FBI interviews, still full of gaps. Kentucky State Police and the FBI interviewed Hensley multiple times. They compared his timeline, phone records, physical evidence, statements from partygoers, what was found in his house, the fire pattern, but no agency has publicly reinforced his timeline. No agency has said they believe he was truthful. No evidence has emerged confirming his movements. And major gaps still remain around the exact hour that Brookelyn disappeared. Investigators have consistently described inconsistencies in the account, unclear movements, unverified statements, all referring to him. And why these contradictions matter. In missing persons investigations, the last confirmed sighting is everything. But here's the truth in this case. Hensley claims to be the last person who saw Brookelyn alive. That's not confirmed. There is no independent witness, no digital evidence, no visual confirmation. His timeline cannot explain the fire. Fire science contradicts the speed and pattern of the burn. His version does not align with her belongings. She would never have left that house without them. His explanation contradicts her text messages. Her urgent "I'm scared" message was sent roughly an hour before he claims that she fell asleep casually on his couch. His claims contradict logic. Her boots, purse, wallet, and overnight bag were left behind. Her phone disappeared with her. None of this lines up with his narrative. So the bottom line is this. These contradictions do not legally prove guilt, but they do prove one thing beyond question, and that is the only narrative that we have about the last hour of Brookelyn Farthing's life is unverified, inconsistent, and contradicted by the physical evidence. And in my personal opinion, Hensley's story should never have been treated as reliable in the first place. When the only eyewitness account collapses under scrutiny, the only logical conclusion is that we do not actually know what happened in that house. But what we do know is this. Whatever happened to Brookelyn did not happen because she got up and walked away. Question number 6. The phone. The ping that led nowhere. The silence that says everything. Of all the clues in this case, Brookelyn's phone should have been the one that answered the most questions. Instead, it's the one that created the biggest void. And in that void, the silence from her phone after 5:30 a.m. might be the most chilling part of the entire investigation. So let's break down what we actually know. The final message and the sharp turn in tone. Brookelyn's phone activity stops abruptly early that morning. At 4:26 a.m., she sends the now infamous "I'm scared" and "please hurry" text messages. And then around 5:30, 5:45, a completely different message is sent. "Never mind, I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County." The second message contradicts everything that she'd been texting for the previous hour. It contradicts her known plans. And it contradicts every piece of physical evidence that was left behind. It also becomes extremely relevant once we get to the phone's location. Next is the final ping, what it tells us and what it doesn't. The last activity from her phone connected to a cell tower in Blue Lick, Kentucky. The tower covers a large radius, several miles in rural conditions, so it tells us the phone was somewhere within that coverage zone, but not specifically where within that zone, and not whether it was moving, stationary, or tossed from a vehicle. Some public retellings incorrectly state that Blue Lick is 30 miles away. In reality, it's roughly 8 to 10 miles from Dillon Court, depending on the measurement points. Either way, it's not on foot walking distance at dawn, a direction connected to any known ride, or anywhere near Rockcastle County, which makes the party in Rockcastle message even more suspicious. There is zero evidence the phone ever traveled toward Rockcastle County. And 3, after that ping, absolute silence. After the final connection, no text went through, no calls registered, no voicemail activity, no app usage, no data pings, no Wi-Fi connections, nothing from law enforcement tracking attempts. Nothing. More than 1,000 calls and messages were made to her phone in the next 24 hours. Not one produced another signal, which means one of 4 things happened. Either 1, the phone died, 2, it was destroyed, 3, the phone was powered off manually, or 4, the phone was placed somewhere where it could not connect to a tower. All 4 scenarios point towards outside interference, not voluntary disappearance. Number 4, the disappearance window, a vacuum of data. Investigators had never released the exact minute the phone stopped transmitting, whether it dropped from tower range suddenly or gradually, whether any partial data packets were received, and whether the tower registered motion or handoff attempts. So the disappearance window is not a clean timeline. It's a gap, and a dangerous one, because no cameras picked her up leaving Dillon Court, no vehicle sightings placed her anywhere, no one else saw her walking, no one saw her in Blue Lick, no witnesses confirmed she ever traveled with her phone after 5:30 a.m. The phone becomes the only thing that we can track, and it barely left a footprint. So what does the Blue Lick ping suggest about the "never mind, I'm okay" message? This is where timing becomes everything. The "I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County" text contradicts her earlier fear. It contradicts her belongings. It contradicts her known plans. It contradicts every witness who knew her. And it contradicts the actual phone ping, which placed her phone in the opposite direction. It is the single least believable message in this entire case. And in my personal opinion, it reads like it was written by someone trying to redirect attention away from Dylan Court. Someone who needed more time. Someone who wanted the people coming to get her to stop coming. So why does the phone matter so much? Because Brookelyn's phone didn't behave like a runaway's phone. It didn't behave like a phone belonging to a young woman suddenly changing her mind, and it didn't behave like a phone traveling towards another party. It behaved like a phone belonging to someone who was stopped, silenced, or prevented from reaching help, or forcibly separated from it. And then the phone was disabled, or destroyed, or hidden, or taken somewhere out of range. That is not speculation. That is what the data shows. So the bottom line is this. Brookelyn's phone provided one final text message that doesn't match anything that she said before, one final ping that doesn't match the text, and then total silence. It never connected again, it never surfaced, and it has never been recovered. In any missing persons case, that combination, a frightened message, a contradictory message, and immediate blackout, is one of the strongest indicators of foul play. And in my opinion, someone made sure her phone could never lead police back to where she really was. Question number 7. No suspect, no arrest. Why hasn't this case gone to trial? More than a decade has passed since Brookelyn Farthing vanished from Dylan Court, and yet no suspect has been publicly named, no person of interest has ever been confirmed, no indictment, no arrest, no explanation. On paper, the case remains open and active. In reality, it feels frozen. And in my personal opinion, there is absolutely no reason this case could not have gone to trial, because other no-body homicide prosecutions have moved forward on far less. And I alluded to this in the Dark Dialogue episode that covers this case. And that is one of the best comparisons is the Heather Elvis case in South Carolina. So why compare the two? Because Heather's case was successfully prosecuted with almost no physical evidence, no body, widely inconsistent witness accounts, and a timeline stitched together mostly from digital crumbs and motive theory. Brookelyn's case, by comparison, has stronger indicators of homicide. So let's break down why. Number 1, what we actually know about the Farthing case's investigative status. No public suspects. Kentucky State Police have never named anybody publicly, have never announced a person of interest, have never confirmed any prosecutable suspect, and have repeatedly interviewed the last known witness, Josh Hensley, without bringing charges. This does not mean they don't have a suspect. It means they haven't reached the prosecutorial threshold they believe they need. Case remains active. Each year, KSP makes the same statement. The investigation remains open. We continue to follow up leads, blah, 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 blah. The public has never been given details that show any substantial progress. So the truth about no-body prosecutions. Here is what the data actually shows. No-body murder trials have an 86% conviction rate. This is higher than the average homicide convictions. Why? Because prosecutors only take no-body cases forward when they already have overwhelming circumstantial evidence. This typically includes lies and contradictions, motive and opportunity, phone data, witness statements, timeline conflicts, provable false alibis, forensic indicators, even minor ones, and behavior inconsistent with innocence. And this is where the comparison becomes unavoidable. This is all my own personal opinion, but this is the Brookelyn Farthing versus Heather Elvis evidence strength comparison from me. The last known location, Heather Elvis was last seen when her date dropped her off at her apartment hours before the crime window and not at the scene of the suspected crime. Brookelyn Farthing was last seen inside the home where a fire broke out shortly after she vanished. Her belongings were left in that home. It is a fact that Brookelyn's last location is tighter and more incriminating than Heather's. Last known companions. Heather was last known to be communicating with Sydney Moore, having spoken to her roommate on the phone and being dropped off by her date earlier that evening. But she was not physically proven to be with Sydney Moore that night, only that she had talked to him on the phone. Brookelyn was last known to be with one person. That person, Josh Hensley. He admits that she was in his home, on his couch, minutes before the fire. No one else confirms seeing her alive after that. It is a fact that Brookelyn's last contact window is far narrower, with only one known individual. Then we have the contradictory statements. Heather, the Moores changed their stories but had partial corroboration. Brookelyn, Josh's account contains inconsistent time frames, inconsistent behavior explanations, a timeline contradicted by fire behavior, no corroborating witnesses, no physical proof that he ever left her alone. It is a fact that the contradictions in Brookelyn's case are more direct, more isolated, and far more suspicious. Then we have the crime scene activity. Heather, prosecutors relied on motive and circumstantial digital evidence. There really was no crime scene. Her car was found at Peachtree Landing. We had phone pings. We had the video proof or the video recordings of a truck matching Sydney's driving past a house both directions. But that's it. Brookelyn, there was a crime scene and a mysterious fire inside a vacant home without electricity within the exact hour she disappeared, and it destroyed the only place that she was last known to be alive. So it is also a fact that the existence of a fire as a destruction event makes Brookelyn's case more forensically stronger. Then we have the digital data. With Heather, the main evidence was cell records showing movement, calls, and motive. With Brookelyn, her texts show fear. Her last message contradicts every known fact. Her phone pinged away from where she allegedly planned to go. It was silent forever shortly after that. So it is a fact that Brookelyn's digital evidence is more suspicious, more contradictory, and more consistent with foul play. So why no arrest and no trial? The publicly disclosed reason? Prosecutors believe that they lack the, quote, smoking gun, forensic confirmation, body recovery, or direct proof of homicide. In reality, in my opinion, this case could have gone to trial years ago, because the question in nobody cases is not, where is the body? The question is, who had the last verifiable contact, exclusive access, and opportunity? In Brookelyn's case, by all publicly known information, only one person was with her. Only one person claimed she was alive. Only one person had control of the scene when she vanished. Only one person reports leaving her unsupervised, and a suspicious fire occurred in the exact hour that she disappeared. That is an evidence chain far stronger than dozens of nobody cases that have already resulted in convictions nationwide. There are cases prosecuted on weaker timelines, weaker motive theories, weaker digital evidence, weaker contradictions, weaker witness accounts, weaker forensic findings, and weaker opportunities. And yes, the Heather Elvis murder conviction happened on significantly less evidence. So the bottom line, in my personal opinion, there is no logical explanation for why this case has not been prosecuted. The evidence is absolutely sufficient for a no-body homicide trial. Many cases with less have seen conviction, including the Heather Elvis case. There is only one person whose account controls the entire final hour timeline, and that alone makes this case prosecutable. The fire, the belongings, the fear messages, the contradictory text messages, and the missing phone creates a stronger circumstantial package than many successful prosecutions. This is a case that should have gone to trial, and it still could. Question number 8. Are these cases connected? There's a cluster of vanishing women in and around Madison County. When Brookelyn Farthing vanished in June of 2013, her disappearance wasn't yet part of a pattern. It was a nightmare of one, and a case that shook a family and a community. But over the next several years, something began happening in this region, something that terrified young women, fueled community suspicion, and triggered online speculation that a predator might be hunting in central Kentucky. 2 cases in particular were repeatedly compared to Brookelyn's. They created a sense of a cluster, even though police have never linked them. Here's what we actually know. Savannah Spurlock, the one case with answers in 2019. Savannah Spurlock, 22, a petite blonde mother of 4, disappeared on January 4th, 2019, after leaving the other bar in Lexington. She was last seen separated from friends, visibly intoxicated, getting into a vehicle with 3 men, heading toward Garrard County, which borders Madison County. That alone triggered comparisons to Brookelyn. 2 young women separated from their support systems late at night with men they barely knew, heading to rural properties. The outcome? Savannah's case was solved. Her remains were discovered 6 months later, buried on a rural family-owned property. David Sparks, one of the men she left the bar with, was convicted of her murder. The relevance to Brookelyn, law enforcement has been very clear. There is no evidence that Savannah's killer had any connection to Brookelyn's disappearance, but the public connected the cases anyway, because both victims were young blondes. Both vanished after being separated from their group. Both were last known to be with men in rural settings. Both disappeared in the same region. Both cases drew national attention. Even though Savannah's killer was caught, the fear didn't disappear because one case had an answer and one didn't. Next is Amanda Bailey, the case with almost no public information. Just days after Savannah vanished, Amanda Bailey, 26, disappeared. The details released to the public are extremely limited. Also a petite blonde young woman, reportedly last seen with her ex-boyfriend, location connected to Madison County. Her body was discovered on a remote Kentucky farm. The cause of death has never been publicly explained. No public suspect has been named. No widely released arrest information. Unlike Savannah's case, Amanda's received little media coverage, but the timing within the same month, combined with age, appearance, and geography, caused a massive surge in online speculation. Theories range from coincidence to a serial predator to shared traffickers, but police have never stated that these cases are connected. So why do people see a pattern, even if police say there isn't one? Well, number 1 is geography. All 3 cases, Farthing, Spurlock, Bailey, occurred within a tight cluster of Madison, Garrard County, and neighboring central Kentucky counties. This is an area of rural roads, private farmland, limited surveillance, and isolated property houses. It's easy to disappear here. Number 2 is the victim demographics. All 3 were young, petite, white, blonde women who were separated from their friends and last seen in the company of men. This creates psychological linkage, even if there's no criminal one. And then we have the timing. 2 cases, Spurlock and Bailey, hit within days of each other. Public fear skyrocketed, rumors spread faster than official information, and Brookelyn's case resurfaced aggressively in the media and online because many people thought this has happened before. Then we have the law enforcement position. Kentucky State Police and municipal agencies have repeatedly stated there's no credible evidence that connects the Spurlock or Bailey cases to Brookelyn Farthing. Each investigation stands alone. No task force has been created to explore cross-case links. There is no identifiable serial predator in the region, and they are aware of the comparisons because the community would not let this issue drop, especially after Savannah was found. But comparisons are not evidence, and police continue to publicly reinforce that point. Then we have the public media and community impact. Even though police deny any formal link, true crime forums, local activists, online discussion communities, Facebook groups, amateur sleuth projects, and local families all maintain the belief that these disappearances are connected in the sense of regional vulnerability, even if not identical predators. The shared fear is real. If Savannah hadn't been found, would we still be asking the same questions we've been asking since 2013 about Brookelyn? And in this region of Kentucky, this cluster of disappearances led to self-defense classes, rideshare buddy systems, increased campus safety programs, bar safety campaigns, and widespread social media warnings for young women. Even if the cases aren't linked legally, they are linked culturally because they change the behavior and fear level of an entire community. In my opinion, the Farthing, Spurlock, and Bailey cases should have triggered a broader multi-case review years ago, even if the predators are different. The pattern of how these women disappeared, isolated, vulnerable moments in rural areas with men absolutely warranted a coordinated investigation. Kentucky has charged men with far less evidence than what exists in Brookelyn's case. Savannah's murder proves that young women in this region are targeted, harmed, and killed in rural isolation. It proves the threat was not hypothetical, and in my view, that alone should have increased urgency for Brookelyn's case. When one case is solved and another goes cold, it creates a very obvious question. If Savannah had vanished in 2013 instead of 2019, would her case have gone unsolved too? Question number 9. Josh Hensley's later charges, what they reveal about his character and why they matter. Josh Hensley, the last known person to see Brookelyn Farthing alive, has never been charged in her disappearance. That is a fact. Another fact is this. Years after Brookelyn vanished, Hensley was arrested and convicted on child pornography charges. This is not rumor. This is not speculation. It is documented and confirmed by Kentucky news outlets, case archives, and the Kentucky Department of Corrections. So let's go through the fact-based breakdown of what is publicly known about this dirtbag. Hensley's arrest, unrelated to Brookelyn's case. In 2020, Josh Hensley was arrested after an investigation uncovered child pornography in his possession. The materials did not involve Brookelyn, the investigation was not connected to her disappearance, and police publicly emphasized this at the time of his arrest. However, his arrest reignited community outrage because it showed that the man alone with Brookelyn, the night she vanished, was later convicted of sexual crimes involving minors. This is not speculation. This is documented. The charges, what they actually were. Hensley was charged with possession of child pornography, a felony in Kentucky. The charges were digital possession, meaning minors depicted in explicit conduct in media files. There are no names, ages, or identities because victims in childhood exploitation cases are protected. Their information is sealed nationally across all jurisdictions, and it absolutely should be. But the important fact is this. The charges involved sexual exploitation of minors. This is not a small charge. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not just a possession charge. It is a legally recognized sex offense involving minors, and he will be required to register accordingly. Hensley was convicted, and as of right now, he remains incarcerated in the Kentucky State Prison System. His exact length is not, I don't know his exact length, but his public Department of Corrections records confirm that he is incarcerated and he is a registered sex offender. He is not, at this time, a free man. So what this means for the Farthing case, fact versus interpretation. The fact is, police and prosecutors have stated repeatedly that Hensley has never been charged with Brookelyn's disappearance. He has not been publicly named a suspect. His conviction is unrelated. Those are the official positions. It is also a fact that he was the last known person to see Brookelyn alive, and his later conviction involves sexual crimes against minors. Those two truths do coexist. In my opinion, Hensley's later conviction for child sexual exploitation confirms something many people already suspected. He is a sexual predator, not just someone with a shady past, not someone who simply partied too hard that night, but a man who has demonstrated a capacity for sexual deviance and predatory behavior that aligns disturbingly well with known patterns in sexual murder offenders. This doesn't prove that he killed Brooke, but it absolutely reinforces, at least in my view, that he was the most dangerous person in her orbit that night and the only person in a position to harm her. So let's talk about how sexual predators escalate. Criminal psychologists have long documented that many sexual murderers and abductors begin with non-contact or digital sexual offenses. Child pornography possession is considered a major risk factor for future contact offenses. Predators often escalate when given opportunity, isolation, and vulnerable victims. This is not about Hensley specifically. It is about the category of crime that he was convicted of and how that category statistically relates to violent offenders. It's why the community was not shocked when Hensley was arrested on sexual exploitation charges. They were angry, but they weren't surprised. They had felt something was off with this douchebag for years. And why this matters in this case, even if police disagree with me. Brookelyn vanished, alone, isolated, in the early morning at a vacant house with a man that we now know is a convicted sexual offender, after sending messages saying, "I'm scared." And then a couch caught fire, and her phone disappeared, and she was never seen again. Regardless of police statements, this combination of facts created overwhelming public distrust, widespread belief that the wrong man went free, and an enduring sense that Brookelyn was failed by the system. And my job is to lay that out all clearly, which brings us to question number 10, the investigative mishandling. What went wrong in Brookelyn Farthing's case? When you talk to anyone who has followed Brookelyn Farthing's disappearance for more than 5 minutes, family, locals, investigators, online sleuths, the same frustration comes up again and again. The investigation did not move fast enough, did not lock down evidence soon enough, and did not treat the scene with the urgency a frightened missing teenager deserves. And that is not speculation. That is not rumor. That is a documented pattern. Number 1, the crime scene was not secured in time. The house on Dillon Court was not treated as a crime scene immediately. Family accounts, reporting, and multiple case archives agree on this point. Police did not seal the living room or the structure quickly enough. The first hours, critical for any missing persons case, were lost. Forensic collection was delayed or absolutely incomplete. This delay meant the fire area was compromised, people moved items, the couch, which was central to the fire and central to Brookelyn's last known location, became degraded before any analysis was completed. The result? Irrecoverable loss of physical evidence. The couch was left outside for weeks. The couch, the object on fire the morning Brookelyn vanished, was removed, placed outside, reportedly exposed to weather and handling, and left there for weeks before any testing was done. This is not minor. This is catastrophic. The couch could have held blood, trace DNA, fibers, fingerprints, accelerant residue. But by the time anyone looked at it seriously, the evidence was gone or contaminated. This is widely viewed as one of the greatest investigative missteps in this entire case. Number 3, forensic opportunities were missed entirely. Multiple objects left behind by Brookelyn, her boots, her purse, her overnight bag, and other belongings were not immediately seized, logged, or tested in the early days of the investigation. Reports indicate that some items sat untouched, some were handled before forensic processing, and some items may never have been tested at all. For a missing teenager who had just texted, "I'm scared," this is almost impossible to believe and absolutely impossible to justify. Number 4, witness interviews lacked rigor, depth, and follow-up. This is not about rumor. It is about documented inconsistency. Josh Hensley's timeline shifted. Key interviews were not repeated immediately. Gaps in the timeline were never publicly clarified. Family members, and this is their direct allegation, believe they encountered evasiveness, stonewalling, and incomplete explanations. Whether caused by limited resources or poor execution, the result is the same: a shaky timeline and a man, Hensley, whose account was never pressure tested with the intensity the public expected. Number 5, the community tips were followed, but often poorly coordinated. There were mine shaft rumors, claimed sightings, potential disposal locations, scattered witness reports. Families and volunteers repeatedly said leads weren't followed quickly, communication broke down, and authorities didn't work collaboratively with the search volunteers. This fractured response allowed misinformation to spread and made legitimate leads harder to track. Then we have the transparency problems and the family distrust. For years, Brookelyn's family has stated that they felt, quote, kept at arm's length by investigators. They cite unclear statements, inconsistent updates, withheld investigative details, difficulty accessing status reports. This is not unusual in open cases, but in this case, it becomes a defining tension point. Reddit, web sleuths, and podcast communities have long criticized inconsistent messaging, the lack of public engagement, the limited press releases, and the absence of detailed investigative clarification. In short, people simply did not trust the process. Number 7 is the systemic context, Kentucky's low clearance rate. This is not only about Brookelyn's case. The state itself struggles with unsolved violent crimes. The Kentucky solve rates in 2013 are as follows. In the Louisville metro area, 45.6%. Statewide, 52 to 56%. The national average that same year was 64%. Kentucky has historically solved fewer homicides than the national average, especially in rural areas involving young women and involving little forensic evidence. Understanding this context is critical. An already under-resourced state was dealing with a complex case during a period of historically low clearance rates. In my opinion, the Brookelyn Farthing investigation failed at nearly every stage that mattered. Evidence wasn't preserved. Key interviews weren't repeated. The fire scene wasn't locked down. And the man I personally believe is responsible, Josh Hensley, was never confronted with the level of investigative pressure that this case demanded. This case had more to work with than many successful prosecuted no-body homicides. Like I mentioned earlier, Heather Elvis is a perfect example. Far less physical evidence, far less clarity in the timeline, and yet that case went to trial, went to conviction, and established guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So compare the two cases. The first factor, the last known location. Brookelyn Farthing, a single empty house. Heather Elvis, her apartment. The last person with the victim, Brookelyn Farthing, one person. Josh Hensley. Heather Elvis, multiple, but none alone with her. Her date dropped her off, but then we know that he left because she talked to her roommate after that, so he's out. So we have one person and multiple people. Then we have a suspicious fire. Brookelyn's case, yes. Heather's, no. The urgent, I'm scared messages. Brookelyn's case, yes. Heather's, no. Belongings left behind. Brookelyn Farthing's case, all of her belongings left behind. Heather's case, no. The victim's phone was missing. Brookelyn's case, yes. Heather's case also was missing. Timeline contradictions. Brookelyn's case, yeah, it's full of them. Heather's case, yes, but far weaker than Brookelyn's. In the physical scene, Brookelyn's case is a single controlled location. Heather's case is multiple public locations and who the hell knows where. So by comparison, Brookelyn's case is tighter, more isolated, and more focused on one key individual. Yet nothing happened. And it is my belief, as an informed commentator, that this case should have gone to the grand jury years ago. So, my final theory: what most likely happened to Brookelyn Farthing based on the evidence and on my opinion. So let's pull everything together. We've walked through the text, the fire, the belongings left behind, the phone ping, the contradictions in Josh Hensley's story, his later conviction for child sexual exploitation, the investigative failures. Now, I want to be very clear about something. What I'm about to say is my opinion. It is my interpretation of the available evidence, the timelines, the fire science, and the behavior of the one man who admits that he was alone with Brookelyn when she disappeared. Josh Hensley has never been charged in her case. He has never been named a suspect publicly. Legally, he is not guilty of anything related to Brookelyn's disappearance. But based on everything that we've just reviewed, here is what I believe most likely happened that night. Brookelyn ends up at the Dillon courthouse late at night. The foreclosed, half-moved out home, no electricity, no water, isolated, rural, dark, a place she didn't plan to be and she didn't want to stay. She was now alone in a powerless house with a man that she doesn't know well, who has all the control. His property access, his vehicle, his rules. She starts reaching out. Texts her sister, texts her ex. I'm scared, please hurry. Everything about her messages say one thing, and that is, I want out of here. In my opinion, what happens next is not an accident, and it's not a misunderstanding. You have an isolated, powerless house, a man who years later would be convicted in a child sexual exploitation case, a young woman who is scared and trying to leave, a massive power imbalance. My belief is that Hensley made a sexual advance. Brookelyn refused, resisted, or tried to leave. The situation escalated verbally and then physically. Whether the assault was completed or interrupted, I believe that sexual violence is at the core of this case, and that violence escalated to murder to silence her, protect himself, and prevent her from reaching out. Once harm was done, whether intentional or in a moment of rage, the next problem for him is the house. Her body, blood or trauma evidence, transfer marks on the couch or on the floor, items showing a struggle. And what happens not long after? A fire starts on or inside the couch, burns down into the floor in a house with no electricity in the exact location where she was last said to be. In my opinion, the fire was not accidental and is absolutely not started by Brookelyn. It was a cover-up designed to burn the area where she'd been, to obliterate blood, hair, fibers, and contact evidence, and to set up a story. She must have started the fire with a cigarette and then left. When Hensley leaves that house, I do not believe he left her there alive. I believe she was already dead or incapacitated and that he staged the rest. Brookelyn's purse, wallet, ID, bank cards, boots, overnight bag, hygiene items, all are still there. The only thing missing are Brookelyn and her phone. No runaway scenario fits that pattern. No, I'm going to another party scenario fits that pattern. No, I just walked away scenario fits that pattern. In my opinion, the belongings were left as part of a narrative. She just left. She walked off. I don't know where she went, but the evidence screams the opposite. We know that her phone left with her. It sent the suspicious, never mind, I'm okay going to a party in Rockcastle County message. It later pinged a tower in the Blue Lick area. After that, it went completely dark. My best guess is that Hensley kept her phone powered off or disabled while he deals with the immediate crisis. He hides or temporarily stashes Brookelyn's body, possibly near the property that he knows, somewhere that he can return to. He waits out the initial chaos, the family calling and coming, the people looking, law enforcement beginning to stir. At some point in the days after, when the pressure pattern changes, he moves her body to a more permanent disposal location, farther out, more hidden, harder to find. Around that time, he briefly powers the phone on again or tosses it from the vehicle in the blue lit coverage area. The phone hits the tower, one last ping, and then is destroyed, submerged, or left where no one will ever find it. Is this provable? No. Is this published as fact anywhere? No. This is my opinion. But it is an opinion that fits her last text, the staged "I'm okay" message, the outward movement of her phone, and the complete and permanent silence that follows. If you accept the idea that the fire was staged and the phone was carefully handled, then it follows that the body was handled the same way. My belief is that she was killed at or near that couch area. She was removed from the house, possibly before the fire was fully set, possibly after it began. She was initially hidden somewhere that Hensley could quickly access and quietly, somewhere close to Dillon Court. When law enforcement focus became more diffuse and the search pattern shifted, he moved her again to a more permanent dump site, somewhere rural, somewhere secluded, and likely tied to land, jobs, or geography that he knows well. And there she remains. So why do I believe that this theory fits better than any other? Any theory about this case has to explain the "I'm scared" text, the sudden "I'm fine going to Rockcastle" reversal, the fire in a powerless house, the downward burn through the couch, the belongings left behind, the missing phone, the blue lit ping, the total silence afterwards, Hensley's later conviction for child sexual exploitation, the lack of any evidence that she left voluntarily with anybody else. In my opinion, the simplest theory that accounts for all of this is this: a sexual advance, a violent response when she resisted, a death he could not undo, a fire to erase the scene, a staged story with her phone, a body moved, then moved again, and a community left without the answers they deserve. Legally, this remains a theory. Morally, it feels like the only thing that makes sense. And until someone with actual authority decides to move this case forward to a grand jury, to charges, to a courtroom, this theory is what many of us are left with. A young woman who tried to get home, a man who should never have been trusted with her safety, and a system that never pushed hard enough to hold him fully accountable. There's a moment in every case, one moment, where the door should have swung open, where the truth should have come crashing through, where somebody in a position of authority should have stood up and said, "Enough, this ends now." And in Brookelyn Farthing's case, that moment came and went more than once. We talk a lot about failures, missed timelines, botched evidence, opportunities lost because someone hesitated when they should have acted or acted when they should have slowed down. But even with all of that, even with every flaw in this investigation, the simple truth is this: this case should not still be unsolved. And the fact that it is, that's not fate, that's not mystery, that's not cosmic bad luck. It's absolute failure. Plain, obvious, preventable failure. Let me put it in this way, because sometimes the simplest analogy cuts through all of the noise. If you lock two people in a jail cell, just two, no windows, no doors, no magical third visitor who slipped in through the ceiling, and you come back an hour later to find one alive and the other murdered, you don't need Sherlock Holmes. You don't need a task force. You don't need a decade of speculation. You already know what happened. And when you look at the timeline of Brookelyn's case, when you look at the isolation of that house, the fire conveniently starting around the exact spot she was last seen, the items she left behind, the last man to see her, his later conviction on child sexual exploitation charges, and the fact that not one single piece of evidence points to any unknown intruder or phantom stranger, I feel like I'm staring at the same damn jail cell. Just bigger, a living room instead of concrete walls, a couch instead of a bunk, a terrified teenager instead of a hardened inmate. And yet Kentucky calls this unsolved. That's not just illogical, it's insulting. Because While Kentucky has been sitting at an unimpressive 52 to 56% homicide solve rate, the rest of the country has been proving over and over that you can solve cases with less than what exists here. South Carolina, for example, the state that successfully prosecuted the Heather Elvis case with no body, conflicting witness statements, shaky timelines, and far less physical evidence than Brooks' case, has an 89.7% clearance rate, one of the highest in the nation, nearly 90% of homicides solved. They took a no-body case, stitched together motive, opportunity, inconsistencies, and behavior, and they built a prosecution strong enough to convict. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, a fire-damaged couch sits outside in the weather. Early interviews are rushed or incomplete. Phone data is misinterpreted. Potential evidence goes uncollected. Witness timelines shift. And the one man with opportunity later gets arrested for child pornography, and somehow nobody thinks to leverage that moment? That should have been the door swinging open. That should have been the bargaining chip. That should have been the deal. You want leniency? You want a plea? You want anything? Tell us where Brookelyn is. Instead, the state wasted its leverage. They blew the one piece of power they had. They let the only meaningful pressure point slip through their fingers. And now, here we are, more than a decade later, with a mother still setting a place at the table that her child will never fill. And what really drives the knife deeper is this. Colorado is clearing almost 77% of homicides. Arizona is clearing 65%. Washington, D.C. has years where they recorded as high as a 91% solved. Even states with brutal crime problems, Illinois, Florida, still manage to push cases forward in situations far more chaotic and violent than this one. So no, Kentucky is not the worst, but it is nowhere near the best. And when you're talking about the disappearance of a teenager, a child, middle of the pack isn't good enough. Average isn't good enough. Maybe someday isn't good enough. Brookelyn Farthing deserved a system that fought for her with everything it had. She deserved a team that secured the scene, protected the evidence, challenged the contradictions, and refused to let silence become a shield. She deserved better than this. And if we're angry, if we're outraged, if we're here saying what no one else seems willing to say, it's because the truth demands it. This case is solvable. This case should have been solved. And the fact that it isn't, that falls on the shoulders of every agency that let those early hours slip away, every opportunity ignored, and every year that passes without accountability. Kentucky needs to get off its ass and treat cases like this, cases like Brookelyn's, with the care, the urgency, and the respect that they deserve. Her life mattered, her fear was real, and somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened to her. It's time they're finally made to answer for it. If tonight's episode moved you, angered you, or reminded you why these cases matter, we want you with us as we keep pushing forward. Like, follow, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell, leave a review on whatever platform you're listening through. Those things help us more than you know. And remember, Dark Dialogue isn't just a podcast. It's a community. It's a movement, a boots-on-the-ground effort to support families, search for answers, and make sure no victim is forgotten. If you want to be a part of that work, you can join the Dark Dialogue Collective, our volunteer network for real-time support, searches, advocacy, logistics, and outreach. You can adopt a victim through our Adopt a Victim program, take on research tasks, and help families who still don't have closure. Brookelyn's case is available for adoption on that. You can support the show directly on Patreon, Ko-fi, or through our Substack, where we share extended case files, bonus episodes, and behind-the-scenes commentary. You can always visit the website at www.darkdialogue.com for resources, episodes, victim tributes, and updates. And if you have questions, case suggestions, tips, or just want to reach out, you can email us anytime at info@darkdialogue.com. This is John, and for Dark Dialogue Distilled, stay curious, stay relentless, and don't let the truth go silent.